Welcome. Thanks for having me. So let's get the slide deck on. Yeah, perfect. So I will be now holding three objects in my hands. What you see here is a potato chips, a bottle of perfume, and set of peels, medical peels. Again, a chips, bottle of perfume, and medical peels. So what does these three objects have in common? Well, they are all three consumer objects. But what is quite interesting and less known fact is that increasingly AI is actually helping in various steps of production of those objects, right? And it comes, from helping to design the shape of the product through things like improving the efficiency in the manufacturing, up to, and this I find really inspiring, even creating the formula in case of perfumes. And those are all public cases. You can Google details of those in just a couple of minutes. So this is all great, but if we look a little closer, and now I would like to show you some more details of those cases. If you look at the whole value chain of production of a product like a chips, there is R&D part, there is a product development part, manufacturing, supply chain, finance, legal and compliance, there is point of sales, there is IT part. If we look at the impact where analytics and AI had in this value chain, it was quite isolated. In this case, this was R&D. And then if we look at the perfume, this was the case where the product was actually designed. So the formula was designed with help of deep neural networks. Yeah, stunning example, absolutely great. However, still, this is just the piece around the product. And if we look at last example, and these are the pills, in this case, AI and analytics helped in the manufacturing space. Amazing case because we saw ROI of nearly 15x on this particular case. Still, this is still punctual, isolated impact in the whole value chain. And now, if we would imagine a situation in which we would be able to produce those or other products and really go across the value chain from R&D through product, through manufacturing, and apply AI and analytics systematically throughout the value chain, I think we can just imagine what sort of impact we would have. And this is an interesting point because if we look at it, this is exactly where companies are getting stuck. So it's relatively easy to start off with POCs, experiments, or even these very impactful cases in isolated part of the enterprise in one corner of the company. But it's much, much more difficult to then get from this level to really systematic use of the data throughout the whole value chain. So why is that? Why is that the case? And why scaling analytics is so hard? Well, there are a few reasons, probably many more, but I would like to enumerate just three. So challenge number one has to do with the way the companies are set up. So if you look at the typical organigram of a company, it might look somehow like that. This is, of course, a bit of exaggeration, just to illustrate the point, but still many organizations are working in a very rigid structures that are very hierarchical, very silo-oriented, and it's no surprise that using data across those silos is very difficult. it's probably difficult to even use the data inside those silos. But then if you think of joining this across the enterprise and using it systematically, having the big picture, it's almost impossible. And of course, it has to do with the processes. It has to do with the organigrams, but it has to do a lot, I think, with the culture, with the way of thinking, and with the ways of working. So this needs to change. And there are at least a few companies which are going in this direction. So in a nutshell, it's about new ways of working, which means also that we form these cross-functional, agile, highly autonomous, product-focused, independent teams that form more form of a mesh rather than this hierarchical ladder. And this allows for a few things. This allows for reactiveness. This allows for agility. This allows also for much more quicker response, because we break these functional silos. We almost have small sub-companies inside the big enterprise, which can be responsible for the whole value chain, from the design of the product through its launch. And this is very interesting space, because we are seeing a number of these biggest companies we have in Europe and globally that are really making this transition from very hierarchical structures to these new ways of working, which are much more distributed, much more autonomous, much more agile. And this, of course, has obvious impact on the way that analytics can be done, and it is a big enabler for analytics to flourish. So this was challenge number one. And talking about challenge number two, it has to do with the way our analytical infrastructures have been built. And so far, the analytical infrastructures quite often tend to be monolithical. But if we look at evolution over the past several decades, I would talk about 3 stages. So this is the first stage, probably a couple decades ago. I would call it the pre-data warehouse, pre-data lake stage. So you have these various operational systems that are spread across the modern enterprise. And if any, analytics is done locally in these different silos. In the next step of the evolution, we went to this data warehousing and then later on data lake paradigm, which is essentially saying we're going to put a monolithical on-prem infrastructure that will collect the data from these various systems, will historize it in a centralized way so that we can then further use it for business intelligence or for artificial intelligence, machine learning type of cases. And it had achieved a lot of success. However, its problem is scalability. So it scales to a certain extent, but if you go above certain critical mass and you want to bring more systems in this central paradigm, it sort of breaks. Which brought us to the new trend, or the new old trend, which is by some called a data mesh. So in this case, what we are doing is we are building analytical capabilities in different parts of the enterprise, and we allow different vendors, we allow different technology stacks to be used. It's almost secondary what's inside. But, and this is a very important point, we put a very strong governance on top to ensure common standards, that's one, and to ensure that we have also common interfaces so that those systems can talk to one another. And the reason for doing this is twofold. So first of all, the monolith doesn't really scale. Second, the needs are so heterogeneous that it's almost impossible to have a single stack that would solve all the problems or would have all the answers. And very importantly here, also with this transition from monolith to the mesh, what we are doing quite often is we are seeing a transition from the on-prem to the cloud. And if we look at it, this is actually not so new paradigm. Perhaps it's new for some enterprises, but there is this famous mandate given in 2002, so almost 2 decades ago, by Jeff Bezos, where he's essentially talking about this. So decentralized, flexible data architecture, where each team owns their solution. They can use whatever technology they want, but they need to expose functionalities and data via common interfaces, here, those being APIs. And of course, Jeff Bezos having his own particular style. Point 6 says anyone who doesn't do that will be fired. So I guess this has been probably implemented quite well in Amazon. So this is challenge number 2. It has to do with the infrastructure. And if we're talking about challenge number 3, it's the immense complexity of this ecosystem. So if you're entering it, you're trying to pick, a set of tools, platforms, or even vendors or partners, you will be very quickly faced with a curse of choice. So there is so much wealth, so many options out there that without deep expertise and deep understanding of this ecosystem, it's very easy to get blurred. And this is something we see quite commonly with our customers who actually struggle to make sense of this exploding ecosystem. And the answer for that, I believe, is a need for a new type of talent, perhaps new type of partners who would help enterprises to navigate this sort of challenges. So if we wrap it all up now, again, to meet those challenges, we are talking about three aspects. And here I'm going a little bit deeper, also giving you some keywords, because I realize that this session is short. Each of these topics could be probably covered in at least 1 or couple hours sessions. So in case you're interested in each of those topics, you would like to explore more, you can Google for those keywords. So around new ways of working, we're talking about agile, we are talking about lean, we are talking also about scaled agile. One nice keyword here is a framework called SAFe. This allows enterprises to apply agile really at the scale of thousands or more, even engineers, or methodologies such as MLOps, which is bringing essentially some of the methods from the development of software to operations of machine learning algorithms, again, aiming to bring them from POCs and toy examples to something that would really scale at enterprise level. When we're talking about this analytics and infrastructure, data mesh is obvious keyword to look for. Cloud and multi-cloud setups, this is, I would say, important and also increasing trend. More and more we see companies looking at the setups where multiple vendors, multiple cloud providers are brought together to basically solve problems, and enterprises need to find ways to combine those cloud solutions together. And around talent, obviously, digital natives, data science, data engineering are a few things that I would advise you to look for. And if we wrap it all up, coming slowly to the closing comments of that session, the question is, why are we doing all that? Or is that really worth it? And for that, I would suggest we look at the next slide. Yes. So this is a list of top companies in US in 2008. And the blue ones are the digital companies. If we look at the year 2018, I think the picture is self-explanatory. This is what happened just in a decade. And I think those companies are obviously doing a lot of things great, but I think their success is also by large factor attributed to the way they deal with the data, their ability to do analytics and machine learning at large scale. So now the key question is how the list will look in 2028, and what can we do about it to make sure that this list is perhaps a little bit more diverse than the one from 2018. And with this thought, I'd like to thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer some questions if there are any.
Thanks a lot. It was great to have some practical experience shared by you, Marcin. Yes, we do have some questions, and one of it was you mentioned that you ensure common standards. So what kind of standards are you using?
Mm-hmm. Well, we are advising companies to set up those standards. It's a whole topic of governance that is, very broad, and this starts, with certain standards around data quality. This has to do with standards around the way the data is being exchanged. This also has to do with some common tools, such as data catalogs, data lineage tools that allow the enterprise to basically harmonize and homogenize this otherwise, I would say, seemingly chaotic picture.
Great. Okay, thanks. Now, thanks a lot that you have been with us and
My pleasure.
sharing
Thank you
your
very much.
experience, and hope to see you very soon in person, Marcin.